Welcome, everybody. It's great to have you with us today. I want to start by acknowledging that Stanford sits on the ancestral land of the Muwekma Ohlone tribe. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Ohlone people. Consistent with our values of community and inclusion, we have a responsibility to acknowledge, honor, and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. My name is Michael Mastrandrea, and I am the research director of the Climate and Energy Policy Program, which is part of Stanford's Woods Institute for the Environment. The Woods Institute is a founding pillar of the Stanford Doerr School of Sustainability and is celebrating 20 years of sustainability leadership, bringing together scholars from across Stanford to advance understanding and develop practical, just solutions to our era's pressing environmental problems. The Climate and Energy Policy Program combines interdisciplinary research with direct policy engagement, serving as a practical, timely, and neutral voice informing decision-making on climate and energy law and regulation. Today, we will be presenting new work led by Abigail Varney, a research fellow with the Climate and Energy Policy Program. Building a workforce that can meet the needs of modern wildfire management will require comprehensive support for all fire personnel. The wildland fire workforce has faced numerous recruitment and retention challenges that are often amplified for groups that are historically underrepresented in the field. And so today, Abigail will present a new report released by the Climate and Energy Policy Program that provides a roadmap to address the persistent cultural and structural challenges that have impeded the development of a more diverse, inclusive, and equitable fire management workforce. We are very grateful to the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation for their support of this work. Abigail's presentation will be followed by a discussion with a panel of wildfire experts that will be moderated by Michael Wara, director of the Climate and Energy Policy Program. And there will be an opportunity for questions from the audience during the panel, so please submit your questions using the Zoom Q&A feature, and we will get to as many of them as possible. And now it's my pleasure to hand it over to Abigail to present this work.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Abigail Varney. I'm a research fellow at the Climate and Energy Policy Program, working on wildland fire workforce development and policy issues. And today I'm honored to present our work, Building a Robust and Representative Wildland Fire Workforce. The wildland fire workforce is facing historic capacity challenges. And in this work, we dive into how a focus on diversity and inclusion can help address the challenge of insufficient workforce capacity, as well as more broadly encourage a shift in the way we manage fire. My interest in this work comes from my own experiences as a wildland firefighter and my desire to see more diversity in the field. To begin, I'll provide some background information on the wildfire crisis and its impacts on our workforce. I'll discuss the challenges and opportunities to better recruiting, retaining, and supporting individuals from groups historically underrepresented in the field, in particular women and people of color. And I'll end by zooming out to present the broader case for change of how diversity and inclusion efforts can help us more meaningfully address current and future fire management needs. As many of us are very familiar, wildfire seasons are growing longer and more severe. For over a century, fire management has meant near complete fire exclusion, which has shifted fire behavior to the most extreme and has had significant impacts on our communities, landscapes, and the wildland fire workforce itself. The fire response system is struggling to keep up with modern wildfire trends, and firefighters have often shouldered the brunt of this burden. Firefighters face additional challenges, including low pay, a lack of affordable housing, and poor work-life balance, which has resulted in a decline in retention, causing widespread resource and personnel shortages. Not only are we struggling to meet growing fire response needs, but we're also failing to accomplish wildfire mitigation work, which is the very work that can help us get ahead of the wildfire crisis at scale. The challenges facing wildland firefighters have garnered increased public attention. Yet an aspect of the problem that is often underconsidered is that of limited workforce diversity. A lack of diversity in the field is not a siloed issue area. but rather one that impacts and is impacted by each other challenge facing the workforce. By better understanding the barriers facing individuals from groups underrepresented in fire, we can develop solutions that improve the well-being of all employees and also create a workforce ready to rebuild a more sustainable approach to fire management. So how do people from underrepresented groups in fire experience these challenges, and what opportunities exist to address them? I do want to preface this piece of our conversation as we focus in on challenges to recognize the firefighters, including myself and other women on my crew, who have made this field of work their home and who are working to build meaningful and sustainable careers and relationships in fire. Though there are real challenges here, this work to build a more inclusive workplace should be viewed not just as correcting a deficit, but also as a desire for more, as a desire to welcome more people to the field and to see them thrive here. My hope is for everyone to have the opportunity to find a fulfilling and long career in fire. And I'm really hopeful that this work can help us get there. The lack of diversity within the federal wildland fire workforce is clear, with 72% identifying as white and 84% identifying as male. There's a whole host of reasons, both cultural and structural, that contribute to these numbers. And for the sake of time today, I want to focus in on a few of them that primarily impact the underrepresentation of women in the field. The first being a lack of compatibility between having a family and a career in fire. And the second, a lack of research and services relating to women's short and long-term health needs. Challenges to career advancement are often amplified for women in fire, in particular because of the difficulty to support a family and a career in the field. Research shows that most women firefighters leave the profession around their 6th or 7th year, which lines up almost exactly with the median age of childbirth in the United States. Evidence also suggests that women are more likely than men to adjust their careers for family obligations, and that they take on the majority of childcare responsibilities. This disparity in non-professional labor has been linked to women achieving career success at a slower rate than men, and it can be exacerbated when both parents are firefighters, as one may feel compelled to leave their career due to the logistical or financial challenges related to securing childcare during the demands of fire season. To better retain women, mothers, and other caregivers, we must recognize the many roles they take on outside of work and make their lives at work more compatible with those realities. Wildland firefighters are also exposed to numerous hazards and stressors that can impact their mental and physical health. Health outcomes for women wildland firefighters remain critically understudied, but research from other first responder groups indicates that women firefighters are at greater risk for adverse reproductive health and pregnancy outcomes, including heightened rates of miscarriage or premature birth. There are a number of occupational exposures that contribute to this increased risk, including wildfire smoke, high environmental temperatures, and exposure to chemicals. These occupational exposures have also been linked to firefighters experiencing higher rates of cancer than the general population, and many cancers are now included in presumptive coverage legislation. However, while male-related cancers were included in such legislation, female reproductive organ cancers were left out. If we hope to create a field that welcomes women firefighters and invites all employees to find long-term career paths without forsaking family or health, then we must provide equal protections and better resources and research to ensure that all employees have the care that they need during and after their careers in fire. There's also a broader case for change for why diversity is so important in this conversation. Not only are individuals in the workforce struggling to find support to pursue meaningful careers in fire, but the nature of the entire workforce's charge is in need of a reorientation towards stewardship. It is becoming widely understood that we must fundamentally change the way we are thinking about and managing fire. In doing so will necessitate a workforce that is equipped to make this change. There are a number of challenges, though, that have made a new relationship with fire and approach to fire management difficult to achieve, including insufficient workforce capacity, a persistently homogenous workforce, outdated fire suppression paradigms, and constraints to community partnerships. A focus on diversity can help us build a larger and more representative workforce to address these first two challenges. But in the long term, it can also help us rethink the way we are managing fire and also the way we are centering community perspectives in those fire management decisions. How we manage fire and who gets to manage fire have co-evolved and are very much linked. For thousands of years, Indigenous people have stewarded the land with the regular and deliberate application of fire. When the United States government forcibly removed Indigenous people from their traditional homelands, it also prohibited the use of cultural fire. The government saw fire as a threat to be controlled or extinguished, which initiated the development of a fire response system that is very good at quick and effective and uniform fire response. This system often fails to incorporate local knowledge and continues to reflect the exclusion of Indigenous people, women, and other minoritized groups. Current wildland fire policy provides more latitude for fire managers to choose between a range of management objectives beyond just full suppression. But additional work is needed to disrupt social and cultural status quos that continue to incentivize full suppression practices. Increased workforce diversity can help us integrate new types of expertise, new perspectives, and new people into this conversation to disrupt patterns of groupthink and encourage a shift in how we manage fire. Another significant challenge is a lack of meaningful opportunities for communities to participate in and shape fire management decisions. In many cases, it is frontline communities who are generating and implementing the most powerful solutions to the wildfire crisis. I've highlighted a number of organizations doing this important work on this slide, though there are many more out there. These communities are also often the ones facing the most disproportionate impacts to wildfire. We saw this more than ever during the 2023 wildfire season, when the Lahaina fire in Maui further impacted access to affordable housing and land and water rights on the island. When wildfires across Canada disproportionately impacted Indigenous people, who account for 42% of wildfire evacuations, despite making up 5% of the nation's population. And cities across the United States experienced severe smoke events, which disproportionately impacts low-income and communities of color due to the legacies of systemic, spatial, and environmental racism. It is because they bear disproportionate risk that we must uplift community-driven solutions to wildfire. There are incredible efforts on the ground to catalyze a shift in our broader relationship with fire, and enabling these partnerships will require an agency workforce that has the people and tools and skill sets to think creatively, to quickly build trust, and to accurately reflect community concerns and desires. By using diversity and inclusion as a frame to examine wildland fire workforce development challenges, we can develop better and more equitable care for wildland firefighters that is long overdue. This will encourage improved community partnerships, more holistic fire management practices, and ultimately a better societal relationship with fire. Thank you so much for your time today, and please feel free to reach out with any questions. I'll now turn it over to Michael Wara, Director of the Stanford Climate and Energy Policy Program, to introduce our panelists and moderate the following portion of today's program.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Abigail, thank you for the presentation. We're so excited to be releasing this paper and continuing our work on wildland fire workforce issues, which we view as critical to success in both the short and the long term in terms of managing the challenges of wildfire in the US and North America. Today, we have a really great panel of experts to just have a discussion about diversity issues in the workforce, both the value of greater diversity as well as some of the challenges in creating it. So first off, we have Matthew Carroll, who is a program manager in the innovation and organizational learning component of the U.S. Forest Service and is a recognized expert on learnings to improve operations and management of complex incidents across the country. Matthew, thank you. We also have Kelly Martin, who is the president of the International Association of Wildland Firefighters and is a recognized expert on wildland fire. She, for a long time, led fire and aviation for Yosemite National Park prior to her retirement from firefighting. Kelly, if you wouldn't mind turning on your Zoom, that'd be great. And we also have joining us Lania Quinn-Davidson, who is the Fire Network Director of the University of California's Agriculture and Natural Resources Extension Program. And Lania is a real leader in developing prescribed burn associations and greater use of or greater wildland fire resilience, particularly on private lands across California. So Matt, I'd like to start with you, if that's okay, with a lead-off. I'm going to ask you all a few questions, and then we're going to start fielding some of the excellent questions that are already coming in from the audience as well. Abigail talked a lot about the potential value of a more diverse workforce. Could you talk a little bit about what your work has found in terms of how a more diverse workforce can change outcomes in terms of safety and operational performance in the field for firefighters?
Yeah, sure. So in my line of work, what I do, the core of my job is to look into and research unintended outcomes, line of duty deaths, etc. And what we've found is that nearly all the time that we research these things, communication comes up. So as people try to work towards finding a common operating picture as an incident is unfolding, understanding and sharing risk and sharing a common operating picture is paramount. And what we found is that if we only look at communication for the stuff that we can see and not all of the social and cultural context that's associated with communication, and that includes all of the power dynamics, we're only telling part of the story. So where this matters for the work that I do and even my work in as a division supervisor out on fires is we ask people to say something if you see something. And if we don't pay attention to the social and cultural aspects and the power dynamics and the differences, then we've missed a whole lot. And we've missed the fact that some people have a much higher hurdle to overcome if they see something in order to say something. And if we don't address that, we've missed so much. And the larger piece of that is if our social landscape has structural hurdles in place that we through time are not addressing for particular members of our community based on how they show up, who they are, what body they have, etc., then we're not learning what we need to learn, and we're not improving safety in ways that we could be.
Thanks. That's really helpful. Kelly, what is IAWF doing at present to try to work on this issue? I mean, the federal, particularly the federal wildland fire workforce, faces enormous challenges in the present for a variety of reasons. And recruitment and retention of talented firefighters is a huge challenge for the federal government. And I mean, I look at young people like Abigail Varney, the author of this paper, as like the workforce of the future, the people we want to recruit and play these roles. What do you think the most constructive steps we could practically take over the next few years for the federal government might be, and how is IAWF working on that?
Thanks, Michael, and just want to say thanks to you and Abigail, and to my colleagues on the panel that I've known for years. It's just a really great honor to be here. I think with the International Association of Wildland Fire, what we are very focused in on is definitely providing conferences for a networking opportunity. So when we host these conferences internationally and nationally, there's all sorts of different focus areas. Like next year, we're going to do the Human Dimensions and Safety Summit that really focuses in on mental health issues of wildland firefighters. We just finished up a conference in Canada, Wildfire Canada conference. We're quite involved in the National Cohesive Strategy as well. So it's a means and a mechanism to bring people together that wouldn't normally know each other. And what we're really finding, I am super impressed with, is the student population and the young adults coming in that really want to be part of a bigger venue of networking and communicating and sharing, skills and expertise, as well as being mentored, by folks that have the institutional knowledge that they, want to pass along. I will say with the federal workforce going forward in the future is going to be challenging. We see it in the news every day. But I loved what Abigail talked about in terms of really expanding the knowledge and understanding that the Wildland Fire Program is much more than just response. And we really have to give consideration to, the communities and the indigenous knowledge, First Nations that have been using fire for millennia, right? And so having that as a part of the dialogue as to how we approach, the fire that's at our doorstep now and into the future in terms of belonging and diversity and inclusion, and feeling like that people can come to work, they can show up and be who they are and feel valued at work. I think that's the biggest takeaway from a business model perspective that we really have to embrace. And it's going to take all of us to really wrap our heads around this and say, what does the future business model look like that's different? And what are those, tenets and characteristics of our culture that has served us well into the future? And what are the characteristics that need to change?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I really enjoyed about the paper is the focus on strengthening the incredible aspects of wildland firefighting culture at the same time as we recognize that there are some aspects that do need change, but
without a doubt. Yep. Yeah.
Thank you. Lenya, your work is really, at least as I've come to know, it has been more about building the workforce outside of the firefighting workforce and more the, some people like to call them fire lighters, but people who are out working on private lands, which are a big part of the wildfire challenge in California, of course, trying to create better wildfire resilience by putting fire on the ground in a really diverse set of environments and settings. And I'd be curious, how you see the sort of diversity challenges playing out in that space, which is a very different space than either the federal or state or local firefighting workforce.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks, Michael, and thanks, Abigail and Cassie, for the beautiful report and for including me today. I guess I just wanted to say one other, my program that I lead deals with diversity across a lot of different scales. And one of the things that you didn't mention in my introduction, Michael, is that I also lead the Women in Fire Training Exchange program. So the WTREX program. So there are kind of two big pieces of my work that both center on diversity, but diversity in really different ways of thinking about it. So the WTREX program is really centered on people who work in fire and trying to bring diversity and increase retention and kind of build a supportive mentorship environment for women and other underrepresented groups in fire. So we could talk a little bit about that piece. But like you said, I also do a lot of work on community-based prescribed fire, especially here in California, and really trying to think about diversifying organizationally too. The thinking that our federal workforce is not the only workforce that exists for prescribed fire, for fire, for fire management, and that a lot of this work needs to be happening at a local level and leaning on local knowledge and on the people who know their places. And so the Prescribed Burn Association movement that has had so much momentum over the last, 5 to 7 years in California has really grown out of this idea that we need to diversify who gets to own fire, who gets to have input on how fire is managed, and who has those tools in their toolbox to make change on the local landscape. So it's kind of a different way of thinking about diversity, but thinking that, definitely cultural burners and tribes need to be involved, that ranchers need to be involved, small timberland owners, and all of that community diversity is reflected in those groups. So your average Prescribed Burn Association in California might have someone from an environmental organization standing next to a university student, standing next to a rancher. And it's just naturally much more colorful and much more innovative space, I think, because those people are all coming with a shared vision and a shared passion, even though their backgrounds are really different. I like thinking about diversity in a lot of different ways, and that it's like biodiversity. If we can build these diverse structures and fund diverse organizations to work on this, we'll be much more resilient in the long run than just having investments in single agencies or single demographics.
I'm going to ask this to all three of you, but if there was a single step that the federal government might take to improve workforce diversity in the fire services, where would you start? And I recognize there are many, Abigail suggests a large number of changes that we could make. But where would, sometimes it's important to start. And I'm curious if there's a place where you think we could see real change or really create more pathways for different kinds of people to stay in the fire services. And I would really frame this as getting people to stay. Like, we really do need the folks that are getting into their 30s and have a lot of experience. As firefighters always seem to say to me, a really great slide deck, which is probably most people who are entering the service have never seen a slide deck before, but we all know what that means. But where would you start? Because I think we need to make progress, and solve one problem and then try to solve the next problem. Matt, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'll take a stab at it, and I'm going to answer your one question with likely two answers, just because, I'm a bureaucrat. Why not? The first thing is, I think Abigail has a lot of great structural suggestions. A lot of the work around making sure that the playing field of the landscape structurally is supporting all people, and women especially, in health regards, in family planning, etc. All of that stuff. That's really, really powerful structural thing that both is actually helpful to people and signals that there is a focus, or there's a need for that. So I would concur that anything structurally would be helpful. And here's the other part. And I think we also need to provide the real engine for cultural change is not agency leadership. It is the people who are doing the things and making the thousands of decisions on the ground every day. And so it is providing a way for that culture, the wildland fire culture, to reflect and to do what Kelly was saying, and others have said, that we want to keep some stuff and let some other stuff go. I will push back and say I don't think we need to strengthen the wildland fire culture. I think it's a pretty darn strong culture. If you measure any sort of conformity, or you show up to a fire camp, everyone's it's a sea of conformity. So, but I think we've hit on it. I think it's a terms thing. Really, we want to be providing that community with the tools to be able to allow wildland firefighters to reflect on their culture, take forward what they want to take forward, and leave behind what they want to leave behind, and mourn the loss of those things too, because it's a lot. Like, allow time for that to happen. That would be my take.
Thanks, Matt. Kelly, what would you say to that question? What would you, if you, in the next...
I could wave my magic wand.
Sure, wave it.
Yeah, I think so. I look at this as a couple of different tiers, right? One is the incredibly entrenched program of training and qualifications through NWCG. I think at one point, when our fire suppression program began after World War II, there was really a need to develop that, and our program grew exponentially. But it really excludes a lot of people if the training and qualifications program is based on suppression. And so if you are a fire practitioner and you're using beneficial fire on the landscape, somehow you still have to meet that incredibly constricted pipeline called suppression. And so I think that in it, as a first step, I think we really have to acknowledge the fact that we're losing a lot of really good people because they just can't get through that pipeline. So that's the first place that I would see that we need some systemic and serious structural changes. That is absolutely a material weakness to increasing the workforce diversity and keeping and retaining employees. The second piece of this is I would look at in terms of Office of Personnel Management and our HR systems overall. You hear universities tell horror stories about their students trying to apply for jobs through USA Jobs, and oftentimes a lot of people that we want to hire locally don't have the access and the resources that a lot of other people have. So I think we have to look at that system as well in terms of what is broken about our hiring system. Again, our hiring system just seems to get more and more constrained, and we lose really good people. And it's not even just the entry-level people, it's the people that are trying to promote that often get, I shouldn't say often, but the stories are also out there that there's people with incredible background and experience that are getting denied and disqualified for their for the next promotion or even a detail assignment. Within the HR system as well, I think we also have to just say, bite the bullet and say, we have people that are here for a 35-year career. If you can make it that far, and a lot of people can't because of the health impacts that Abigail was talking about, Abigail and Matt. But I think we need to look at, a tiered approach to how a person moves through their career apprentice, journey, master, executive, and we just call it that. We have to have, career ladders that span, those three phases of one's career, and we just have not been able to break that roadblock with Office of Personnel Management within our HR. And then the last piece of this is definitely legislation. So there is some very arcane, onerous policies that are out there that we keep just seeing more and more policy, and we're not taking away policy that doesn't serve us well anymore. So I think we're having to work really hard, and myself and Matt, and there's others on this call as well that work for grassroots wildland firefighters. And so as an advocacy group working with Congress, there's a lot of things that we need to change legislatively that the agencies can't change. So knowing that, what do we ask our federal agencies to do? There's some things that we can do internally, but knowing that we have a really arcane policy called a 3-day break in service. And if you're, on your track of a wildland firefighter, as a federal wildland firefighter, and you have a break in service to take care of a spouse, raise a child, take care of your elderly parents, if you have more than 3 days break, you cannot come back in and still have your firefighter retirement. So it's things like that we also need to really pay attention to, that that there's so many systemic issues that are really collapsing the entire organization. And if we really want to make transformational changes, we have to recognize that some of these things are so have to be dismantled in order to build it back up again. And within that legislation is certainly the Wildland Firefighter Pay Protection Act that really, compensates the people that are on the front line day in, day out, year after year, that are truly being exposed and having issues, with mental health, as well as, cancers and cardiovascular. And talked about Abigail mentioned that there was a lack of acknowledgement by the Department of Labor of recognizing female reproductive cancers. And for what it's worth, this was great. Grassroots wildland firefighters, sent a letter to Department of Labor, requesting the fact that reproductive cancers need to be a part of the presumptive diseases. So lots going on there in a very short period of time. But I think with the people that we have here participating today, I think there's a tremendous desire to really think about what it is that is going to be truly transformative going forward.
Thank you. Lenya, could you offer perspective? I mean, what if there were changes you'd like to see to build a more diverse workforce, where would you start?
Yeah, well, I love what Matt and Kelly both touched on, and I'm glad Kelly talked about grassroots and all the kind of structural things that need to be happening. I guess in my work personally, lean more toward the culture change aspect. Really, especially in the WTREX program, trying to shift the social norms in fire and how we relate to each other, how we support each other, what kinds of training opportunities are available, how safe are those opportunities? And I don't mean just physically, but psychologically safe. Are we taking care of people? And how do we shift the culture of fire away from efficiency and suppression and this kind of militaristic mindset to one that's more about competence for sure, but also about care and about stewardship and connection with the land and with each other. And I think that's why a lot of the local work is so important, whether it be within the agency or within the community-based organizations, this idea that there's a local connection to the place, to the land that we're managing fire on. I mean, fire is the single most impactful process that is altering our landscapes and affects the resilience of our landscapes. And I really feel like a lot of those decisions should be coming from the local people. So when we see these kinds of top-down organizational structures that can shut down whole programs for periods of time and disempower the workforce that's within the agency, I think that's really problematic. But also just related to the way that individual people are interacting with each other. So like in the WTREX program, we do a lot of work around mental health. We do a lot of work around allyship, trying to help people understand just how to take better care of each other. and how to make it a workplace that people want to stay in. We do a good job of recruiting people into fire, but we don't do a great job of taking care of them once they're there. So how can we shift those social norms and just make it more fun and joyous and cohesive, I think, as a culture that naturally creates a lot of space for different kinds of people. I think that, even a lot of men, what we found in W-Trex, because we include men, we include the whole gender spectrum within that program. And we see a lot of men coming forward and saying, honestly, I've never felt comfortable in the fire culture. It's not a good fit for me. And I do a lot of posturing just to fit in there. So I think there might be more people than we think who aren't actually very comfortable or feeling very secure in that culture. And so, yeah, I would start with changing culture, which can take a long time. And I think it can also happen quickly. I mean, we've seen in California, we've completely shifted the culture around prescribed fire in the last 10 years in California in kind of a radical way that we wouldn't have anticipated. And I think that's possible within the larger workforce too.
We have a question from the audience I think is a really interesting one that I want to ask the three of you to respond to, which is, this conversation so far has been very focused on the federal workforce. But of course, part of the retention challenge for federal wildland firefighters are other opportunities. And particularly, in California, we just, in a very difficult budget year, CAL FIRE was able to achieve an outcome where they are going to be hiring on the order of, I think, 2,500 new firefighters in the coming year. I imagine a lot of those people are coming from the federal workforce. I mean, in some ways, the federal workforce may be the place where you get trained, and then you go and get, a job that is more compatible with a family and pay and benefits that are more compatible with a family in the state workforce. And how do you think about that challenge? Like, are state and local departments more open to an easier fit for a more diverse workforce? Are there ways that the federal government can learn, or vice versa, that the states and local departments can learn from the federal workforce, or the challenges they're confronting? What do you think about that interaction in this workforce discussion?
Oh, that's a broad topic as well. I think that the attrition has been going on throughout my career as well. That feds get trained up. They know that the local fire departments and state fire departments pay better. There's a better work-life balance. And so, the states realize that, the feds have actually funded the training and qualifications, and it's a lost cost to federal taxpayers when you lose, a trained federal wildland firefighter. So I think we also need to just reaffirm that there's a part of this that the overall fire program is inherently governmental, and that could be federal and state as well. But I think without a robust federal workforce and a federal response, we're going to continue to see these large catastrophic fires. Those aren't going away. So I think it's really important that we affirm that a federal response, and that response can be planning, mitigation, prevention, and post-fire as well. Doesn't have to be just suppression, but it's the whole of government that I think is really, really important. One of the things that I am also seeing, and you've seen this in counties in California, called contract counties, where the counties have the ability to contract with, CAL FIRE contracts with the county to provide, response. And I think we may be on the verge of having to do that for the federal workforce, because the federal workforce just can't make enough money to live in these really high expensive areas. There's just no housing, rents are super high. A lot of the fire stations that are federal are left vacant. Same thing with the fire engines. A lot of people have said at one point, the federal response, especially the engines in Southern California, they were the envy of a lot of municipal fire departments. And so now what you're seeing is folks like CAL FIRE and a lot of county fire departments have their own and unique and building on the wildland fire response side. So yes, you are going to see more federal employees go to state municipal departments, but I think the affirmation to be able to build and support, what is inherently governmental to support state and local governments, the federal workforce has a very, very important part to play. It may change in the years to come, and it may not just be wildland fire. It may be, which we do, is all hazard response. So I think that we got to keep that in mind, that should not go away. The public should demand it, and we are there to serve the public.
Yeah, I guess I'll offer a fairly brief opinion, and would love to hear other thoughts on it. The federal government is large, right? And state and county governments are small and potentially more nimble. What I think the federal government has for us, and I'll speak for the Forest Service, that we have a highly trained and highly committed workforce who set the bar for what the standard is, and that, from a cultural standpoint, is something we can rely on. Now, if our bureaucratic processes now begin to outweigh, the reason why people choose to work for the Forest Service, choose to work for a federal agency, then we'll see more people leaving, and all the stuff that Kelly talked about, and the big legislative and administrative changes that need to happen are really important, and we can't lose sight of the fact that we're currently the standard. So if we lose that too, boy, we'll see even a greater exodus.
I don't know if I have too much to add on this one. I mean, I guess I think that attrition issue is a big one. We definitely see it a lot in California. I don't know if those local and state agencies are doing much better on the diversity and kind of caring work environment piece. So I don't hear that, that there's a big difference there. It seems like it's mostly driven by kind of pay and opportunity more so than culture and climate within those agencies. So I guess I'd be curious, to think more about that and what that looks like. But
one of the things that really jumps out of the data that many people have pointed out is just the rate of attrition at the point where men and women consider having a family. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, without large scale change, how that can be addressed. We live in a particular culture where, for better or worse, women provide more of the caregiving in our society, and then I think that's shifting. And certainly, some of the aspects of a wildland firefighter, a life spent in wildland firefighting, make it even hard to have a 2-income family, right? Or have two incomes, just because of the need to be away from home for very long amounts of time on these large incidents, which are going to continue to happen, as Kelly and I think a number of you have pointed out. So are there things that we could do to make it easier for men and women? And I think about this, my spouse works, and I look at the lives and challenges of wildland, like a life spent in wildland firefighting, and see it would be very difficult to have a 2-income family and to also have children. Mm-hmm. And so this seems fundamental if we're going to recruit from the entire pool of workers that we would like to have, and have a set of and retain people beyond age 30 or 32, or have a high retention rate. Do you see, like, where is there potential progress? Is that just a pay and benefits issue? Are there structural changes in the way that we manage large incidents that would have to occur? Are there other examples? A number, I know that both Kelly and Lenya spend time in lots of other countries with very different fire service cultures and approaches to wildland firefighting. Are there examples that you would hold up where that is easier? It's never going to be easy, but
Right.
where it might be easier. Because this is going to be we're not going to, it's not black and white, right? This is a matter of degree.
I don't know if
I
there's-
guess, oh,
Go ahead, Lena.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, I think on some level, this does get back to that idea of organizational diversity too and local fire management. And I mean, I know speaking for myself and my husband, who works for the National Park Service in fire, we're both juggling travel all the time, and we have a kid, and it's super challenging. And a lot of people who work in fire have a partner who works in fire, and that's a very common occurrence. And I think it's really important that we invest in and believe in local models of fire management, where someone like my husband, for example, could have a career that's based more locally, working in prescribed fire, working in fire management. There's a lot of incentive to move around. I mean, we talk about it a lot. He's like, if I want to promote, I should be going to these other parks and I should be moving around and doing, and we don't want to do that. We're community-based people. We have, we're really integrated in the place where we live. And there's a little bit of discontinuity there, I think, in the expectations in the fire workforce. So I really like the idea of developing career trajectories in fire that are place-based. And that supports family, it supports stewardship. That should be the model rather than the model we have now that's really creates a lot of fracturing, both within the family and within the community and within the agencies as well. So I guess that's what I would offer.
I just know there's a commenter that provided a perspective that he feels a bit shunned by this presentation, in the sense that it is more that the focus on DEI doesn't pay attention to the fact that many men suffer from a lot of these challenges as well, like the challenges that we're pointing out. I would heartily embrace that perspective and say that one of the goals of the work and the intention of the paper is really to build a workforce that works for everybody as people living in America in the 21st century, right? And rather than a model that maybe worked better when more people had single family income households at a much earlier time, when a lot of the operational approaches that we have today were developed for wildland fire. We have a question.
That. Just real quick, I appreciate that. I do hear that often as well. But and again, this isn't just purely numbers, but when you see that our organization is mostly white and mostly men, that's why we take this perspective. And without a doubt, I think fathers need to be there for their children. And this is why I think when we talk about the 3-day break in service, we actually had the union promote this as well. Is like, why limit the break in service? If men want to take off to care for the children while the woman goes back to work, why should there even be any sort of penalty for this break in service? So somebody can work 10 or 15 years, they can resign their position, they can come back in and still restart their clock, if you will, for retirement. And that would benefit both men and women. So I apologize if it seems, heavily, tilted towards, diversity of women. It's just that the lived experiences that I've had, I'm super supportive and promotive of people feeling like they belong. And it's not, just women, but we know that we still have some structural and cultural issues out there that really, and I think there's probably a lot of our listeners on right now that can see that it is very difficult when somebody doesn't look like you, act like you. It is very difficult to feel like you belong in that tribal culture.
Really quickly, we're coming up on time, but we've gotten a number of questions from the audience about the political change that's coming to the United States in January, and what, if anything, that might mean for efforts to strengthen the wildland fire workforce. And maybe I don't, if anyone's willing to comment on that, I'd be interested to hear your perspectives. I heard a number of them lately, but I'm curious from the call. Matt.
I'll offer a brief perspective as well on that. I think anytime there's an administration change, there is increases in uncertainty, right? We don't know. We don't know exactly what the direction. We may not even know who's going to run departments and what have you. So how do we respond to uncertainty? We respond to uncertainty by accessing diverse perspectives. We have to have both have diverse perspectives present, and we have to have access to them. So the first one may be structural, the second one may be cultural and more in line with inclusion. How do we bring in those voices? A hiccup in that is that if we are asking people who represent diverse communities to voice diverse perspectives within the existing culture, often it's higher risk. So we're asking the people who are sort of at the edges of the normative culture to offer these countercultural perspectives too. So it's both a structural point and a cultural point. We absolutely have the people within the culture. We have the power to do it. Men, women, and people of all gender and backgrounds and what have you. We're there, and we all are focused on the cool thing it is to be a wildland firefighter and the great work that still needs to be done. So it's having diversity there and access to it, and to get back to it, a thing I heard someone in the military once said that you recruit, in our case it would be wildland firefighters, you retain families. So while some of this might be geared towards women, we're talking about the paper specifically today, it really is about retaining families in a lot of the stuff we're working, and that includes all members of the family.
Well, I think that's a fantastic place to end. And I want to thank the three of you, Matt, Kelly, Lenya, for taking some time to talk with me today about this issue and about Abigail Varney and Cassie Gerenci's paper. Thank you very much to the audience as well for tuning in today, and have a lovely afternoon.